Hello, this is Mike Jacko with Minrea, and another Flippin' Friday video tip for you. And today I want to talk about comps, and that's one struggle a lot of people have. Is even when you do get comparables from the realtor, how do you disseminate what you want to look at for comps? So I just want to cover a couple of the basics of what we want to use or try to find properties as comparable properties. First of all, we want to look for properties that have a similar number of bedrooms and bathrooms, but square footage as well. That's an important factor, is what's the square footage. And what I typically will use is a plus or minus 15% of what our square footage is. So for example, if we had a 1,000 square foot subject property, we would take 15% plus or minus 15% of the 1,000 would be 150. So that would bring us down to 850 for the minus, and then 1150 for the plus. So we would want to find comparables that were between 850 and 1150. And you can, fudge that a little bit, but that's just a generic rough number for you to use. Also, year built, and this depends on the areas that you're looking at. If you're in a densely populated area that has properties that were built from the 1940s up to the 1980s, and they're so scattered in there that it's not that big of a deal, and they all look very similar, that's probably not quite as important as it is in most areas where you do need to try and find properties that were built within a similar time frame. And there I typically like using 20 years plus or minus. So again, for an example, if the property was built in the year 2000, we would want to look for properties between 20 years plus or minus, so between 1980 and then as obviously current, so we would go up to like 2020 at the most. If we're looking at a properties built in 1950s, we'd want to go 1930 to 1970. So we want to find properties in those similar price ranges. Also, another big key is when it comes to foundations. So when you are looking at properties that are going to be built in that 1950s, 1960s, 1970s time range, there was a transition in the type of foundations from the 1940s and 1950s. So if you're looking at something that was built in 1960, let's say, and I said 20 years plus or minus, we might want to eliminate the 1940s because they might not have block foundations, whereas your 1960 property probably would have block, or the block would be a smaller. A lot of times you'll see a rock foundation in those older ones. And it's just not the same type of foundation. So that's another key to look at. And then once you found those particular properties, then you could take the average of those properties, average amount, to get the average or the ARV or the after repaired value of those properties for your subject property.